In the fading glow of dawn, elders whisper of a child named Zuri, daughter of a home heavy with gold yet light with gratitude. A question rose in her chest like smoke from a careless fire. What would life feel like with another mother, one who obeyed my every command? The thought tasted sweet upon her tongue, for she saw only softness beneath her feet, and believed hardship existed only in stories meant to frighten stubborn children. Far across the land, in a dwelling woven from patience instead of wealth, lived Kemi, a girl whose laughter trembled beneath the weight of lack. Her mother's hands shaped love from scarcity, yet Kemi wondered how joy might feel wrapped in silk. Her silent wish slipped into the wind the same night Zuri's bold longing took form, and the spirits who listened to careless dreams stirred. Within the invisible places where destinies braid, the mothers felt a tremor of knowing. In the stillness, each wondered, what lesson lies ahead? What truth hides behind the desire we cannot shield our daughters from? Unspoken agreement drifted between their hearts, older than time, carrying both fear and faith. And so, without footsteps, messengers, or moonlit ceremonies, the world turned inside out. Zuri awoke beneath a roof stitched with struggle. Kemi greeted a morning lined with abundance. One tasted meals that whispered tales of sacrifice. The other touched treasures that glimmered without gratitude. Their spirits shivered beneath the weight of discovery, for comfort can sting when its roots are unseen, and hardship can teach sweeter songs than generosity left unrecognized. When moons had risen and fallen, both girls pressed their faces to the truth they once ignored. And the land itself leaned close, eager to witness how pride bends, how love mends, and how hearts find their rightful homes. When the palm tree bends, the wind has spoken, used to foreshadow change and life lessons. Long ago in the bustling heart of Abadan, a city of clamor and color, the morning sun painted golden streaks across tiled rooftops and dirt roads alike. When the palm tree bends, the wind has spoken, the elders would say, and today, that wind carried whispers of lives about to touch. On one side of the city stood the Eniton estate, a fortress of white walls and iron gates that gleamed under the relentless sun, guarded by men in crisp uniforms who moved with precision and pride. Inside, roads shimmered like mirrors under the early light, lined with hedges trimmed into perfect shapes, and flowers that bloomed with colors so vivid they almost seemed painted by human hands. Within this sanctuary of comfort lived Mrs. Folishade Adebala, a matriarch whose name echoed in boardrooms, her reputation forged from decades of relentless determination and the careful crafting of an empire. Her mansion rose like a crown upon the estate, its glass walls reflecting not only wealth but authority. And in the largest room of this house slept Aamide, her only daughter, a child born with every comfort imaginable, whose bedroom alone could house an entire village of less fortunate children. Her sheets were soft as clouds, her carpets warm under her feet, and her toys, though abandoned, were treasures from distant lands. Each morning Aamide awoke with discontent. "Why is my tablet not the newest?" she asked one morning, voice tinged with frustration, while her breakfast sat untouched, laid out by the maid who had served the family for 10 years. "Do I always have to wear the same dress?" she murmured, unaware that the woman at the table, her mother, watched with a mixture of love and quiet sorrow. "Aamide, remember those who pray for even one morsel of food," Mrs. Adebala said softly, placing her hand over hers. "Many would give all to be where you are." But Aamide only rolled her eyes, a sigh escaping her lips. "You don't understand." And across the city, where the roads were no longer smooth and the air smelled of wet earth and smoke, another morning began quietly. Here, the houses leaned with age, patched together with timber, zinc, and hope. When rain fell, it crept inside the fragile walls as if to remind the residents that comfort was a fleeting luxury. Within one of these homes lived Mama Iriti and her daughter Ifialua, who was Iamide's age though worlds apart in fortune. Ifeoluwa rose from a thin mat upon a creaking floor. Her uniform faded and stitched repeatedly. Her shoes worn to the soles. Breakfast was a small portion of pap, thin and warm, but her voice sang with gratitude. "Mama, thank you for this. God will bless you." Mama Iriti, a widow whose hands bore the marks of toil and resilience, nodded with a quiet strength, though her eyes betrayed the weight of struggle. She washed clothes, carried water, and begged at the gates of the wealthy estate, but never allowed despair to shadow her daughter's heart. Ifeoluwa, though aware of the playgrounds she could never touch, and the swings she only admired from afar, whispered prayers as she walked to school. "Thank you, God, for today. Maybe tomorrow." Fate had a subtle rhythm in the city, weaving the lives of two girls like threads in a single tapestry, bringing them close, yet leaving a space between, a space filled with longing, wonder, and lessons yet to unfold. Every afternoon, Mama Ireti positioned herself near the iron gates, her bowl held humbly, as the children in the estate played freely. Some guards ignored her, some waved her away, but sometimes a coin would drop from a passing hand. Aamide noticed her often. "Why doesn't she work harder?" she asked one afternoon, frowning at the figure in faded cloth standing under the blazing sun. Mrs. Adebola's eyes softened as she observed. "She works every day with a heart larger than yours, my child. Life does not offer fairness to all." But fairness was a concept Aamide struggled to grasp. That evening, as the city lights began to blink awake, both girls rested in their separate worlds. One surrounded by abundance she did not cherish, the other by scarcity she embraced with grace. Aamide lay sprawling on her oversized bed, her phone buzzing with notifications, her toys idle around her. Ifeoluwa lay beside her mother on a worn mat, listening to her quiet breathing, grateful that each day began and ended safely. Neither girl knew the other's name. Neither could imagine the storm of change approaching them. Above both homes, the sky stretched wide and indifferent, watching silently, preparing for a collision that would reshape hearts and awaken understanding. Morning returned to the city unevenly. In the Eniton mansion, sunlight filtered through wide windows, bouncing off polished floors, illuminating the world of privilege. Maids moved like shadows, adjusting curtains and preparing breakfast with ceremonial precision. Iamide's eyes fluttered open, frown already forming. "Why is it so noisy?" she demanded, pulling her pillow over her head. "Yes, madam. Sorry, madam," the maid whispered, retreating. Breakfast awaited like a sacred ritual: pancakes, eggs, fruit, but she barely touched it. "Again," she muttered. "Why must it always be the same?" Mrs. Adebola, fresh from an early call with business partners overseas, regarded her daughter with a quiet ache. "Aamide, many children do not have even this. Gratitude is not about what you have, but how you see life." Iamide's eyes rolled, her lips twisting into disdain. Across the city, in the narrow streets of mud and timber, Ifeoluwa woke to the rhythm of rain dripping through a hole in the roof. Mama Ireti counted coins from the previous day. "This is all we have today," she whispered. Ifeoluwa smiled softly. "It is enough, Mama. Thank you." Together they shared a simple meal, their hearts rich in ways Aamide could not yet comprehend. That morning, Ifeoluwa dressed carefully in her damp uniform, held her mother's hand, and whispered, "One day, Mama, I will take care of you." Mama Ireti's eyes glistened. "Do well in school, child. That is enough for me." On the path to school, the playground near the estate called silently to Ifeoluwa. She paused, fingers clutching her bag tightly. A wish slipped out of her heart, tentative and fragile. "I just want to try once." She corrected herself quickly, whispering, "Thank you, God, another day." Meanwhile, in the estate, Aamide, bored in her classroom, wondered why her mother always spoke of gratitude, why she could not simply enjoy wealth. The house felt too quiet, her toys useless, and the luxury suffocating. That evening, Mrs. Adebola tried once more. "Come, sit with me." Aamide obeyed reluctantly. "When I was your age," her mother began, "I had less than half of what you possess. Sometimes I slept hungry. Sometimes tears were my pillow. But I thanked God for each morning, for each breath." Aamide interrupted sharply. "Why dwell on your suffering? That was your life, not mine." Mrs. Adebola's voice trembled slightly. "I tell you so your heart will not harden." Aamide's eyes narrowed, her words ready. "I wish you were not my mother. I want another one who understands me." Silence fell heavy as the walls absorbed the weight of her declaration. Mrs. Adebola's thoughts raced. "Be careful what you wish for," she whispered to herself. Outside, the city continued unaware. Somewhere, between mud and marble, two daughters were poised on the threshold of lives about to trade. Not in possessions alone, but in understanding, in heart and in destiny. Something was shifting in the wind, but no one yet knew how. The sun rose over Ibadan, glinting on corrugated rooftops and polished marble alike. But the day felt heavier than usual. Something was shifting in the wind, but no one yet knew how. In the Eniton estate, Aamide stirred reluctantly, the luxury around her now seeming less like comfort and more like a cage. She sat upright, eyes lingering on her vast room as though searching for an escape. The walls were silent witnesses to her complaints, yet they offered no answers. Breakfast was prepared with the usual precision, golden pancakes stacked carefully, eggs steaming in their pans, fruit cut in perfect symmetry. The air smelled of honey and fried yam. Aamide picked at the pancakes, her mind restless. Outside her window, beyond the iron gates and pristine hedges, the city moved in rhythm, unaware that two lives were about to collide in a way no one could predict. At the same time, in the cramped quarters of Mama Iriti, the day began with a prayer whispered through thin lips. "God, help me guide her today as you guide me." Ifeoluwa brushed the mud from her faded shoes and straightened her uniform, though a small hole in the sleeve betrayed years of wear. Mama Ireti handed her a small tin of pap and a piece of bread. "Eat slowly, my child. Let it nourish you for the day ahead." Ifeoluwa nodded, her eyes scanning the dim corners of their home, lingering on the cracked walls as though expecting them to speak secrets of survival. She thought about the playground beyond the estate's gates and wondered how it felt to swing high into the air, without fear, without the weight of hunger pressing at her stomach. The memory of yesterday's prayers lingered. She repeated them quietly. "Thank you, God, for today. Perhaps tomorrow will bring more." Across the city, Aamide had already found fault with her day before it truly began. "Why do we always eat the same things?" she muttered to the maid, who remained patient, her face a mask of practiced calm. "Aamide, gratitude is more than taste," Mrs. Adebola said gently, entering the dining room, her eyes scanning her daughter's expression. But Aamide only turned away, uninterested in lessons she could not yet understand. Meanwhile, fate began its subtle work. The wind whispered through the streets, carrying with it leaves, dust, and whispers of change. Mama Iriti tightened her wrapper as she stepped out to sell small bundles of vegetables. "I must make today enough," she murmured. Ifeoluwa followed closely, eyes wide, legs quick despite the rough path. On the edge of the estate, a small crowd gathered, curious about the woman and her child who appeared every day, seeking alms. Some ignored them. A few tossed coins, small blessings meant to keep hope alive. Aamide, leaning against the balcony, watched the scene with barely concealed disdain. "Why does she even try?" she asked sharply. Mrs. Adebola's gaze lingered on the girl outside, not with judgment, but with quiet consideration. "Because she must," she said softly. "Some battles are fought with hands, some with heart." Hours passed. Ifeoluwa attended school with a quiet resilience, her eyes absorbing lessons not only from teachers but from life itself. She helped a classmate who had dropped her books, shared a small piece of bread when hunger struck a friend, and whispered prayers for those too timid to ask. Her humility and respect made her a quiet star among peers, though she never sought attention. In the estate, Ayamide wandered through her lessons distracted, her mind churning with irritation and boredom. The words of her mother floated in and out of her thoughts. "Gratitude is about the heart, not the hand." She scoffed silently. The afternoon sun pressed down with a weight that seemed to mimic Ayamide's own discomfort. Mama Ireti returned howed, but unbowed, counting the coins she had earned. Ifeoluwa watched silently, admiring the determination that made even scarcity appear dignified. Back at the estate, Mrs. Adebola walked through her office, numbers and deals waiting for her. Yet her mind lingered on the daughter she could not reach with wealth alone. "Something must change," she murmured to herself, staring out at the distant horizon where the two worlds brushed but never touched. That evening, Ayamide's restlessness had grown unbearable. She refused to eat again, insisting that the food was not appealing. "You always say this," her mother sighed, kneeling to her daughter's level. "I speak so your heart remembers, not because I enjoy lecturing." Ayamide huffed, frustrated that her mother could remain calm while her own life felt incomplete. Elsewhere, Mama Ireti whispered with prayer beads between her fingers. "Guide her, God," she said quietly, staring at the sky as though it might deliver her child from a world she had yet to experience. Night came with stars barely visible through the city haze. Ayamide tossed in her bed, blankets heavy and suffocating. She felt a strange unease, one that did not belong to her usual complaints. Something inside her stirred, a discomfort she could not name. Somewhere in the swampy lanes of Ibadan, Ifeoluwa lay on her thin mat, whispering prayers for her mother, for her friends, for the child who had everything but understood nothing. And in that unlit, humble home, gratitude glowed quietly, strong as the embers of a dying fire. The next morning, Ayamide awoke to an emptiness she had never encountered before. Breakfast lay untouched. Her phone was charged, her toys still in place, yet a strange unease clutched at her chest. "Why do I feel this way?" she muttered, staring at the golden walls that no longer seemed protective, but isolating. Outside, the city hummed, unaware of the lesson about to begin. Mama Ireti emerged to sell small wares at the edge of the estate, Ifeoluwa trailing, carrying her small bundle of possessions. Coins dropped from passing hands, some generous, some grudging. She bowed and whispered thanks for each, her heart recognizing each act as a blessing. Ayamide leaned from the balcony again, frowning. Why does she not fight back? Why does she bow? She demanded. Mrs. Adebola watched her daughter, her lips tight, heart heavy. "Because strength is not always loud," she replied. "Some of the strongest hearts bow quietly, teaching what wealth cannot buy." That evening, a plan began to form in Mrs. Adebola's mind, heavy with risk and tempered with resolve. She had guarded Ayamide from hardship her whole life, and it had built walls around her daughter's heart. If she must learn, she thought, it cannot be through comfort. The wind whispered again through the city, rustling palm leaves and laundry hung on lines, carrying with it the scent of rain and the promise of change. Somewhere, a decision would be made that would alter the lives of two girls, their mothers, and the paths of gratitude, humility, and understanding. And while neither girl yet knew it, the collision was imminent. Iomide's eyes closed that night with a restlessness she could not shake. Ifialua's whispered prayers trailed into the dark, light as incense in the air, preparing her heart for the unknown. Outside the estate gates, Mama Ireti rested on her stool, hands folded over her chest, listening to the wind. It carried a message she could not yet hear fully, but one she would soon understand. Across the city, the two mothers slept under different roofs, yet one thought circled both minds. The lessons the daughters would need could not be taught by words alone. Only experience would speak. Only hardship would carve understanding into hearts untested. When the morning came, something subtle had shifted. The Eniton estate, the mud lanes, the silent prayers, they all seemed to hold their breath. The wind, moving through the city, carried secrets of an exchange that would soon begin. A child of wealth would learn humility. A child of scarcity would see abundance. And both mothers would watch, holding their hearts in anxious anticipation. For when the palm bends, the wind has spoken. And when the wind carries a whisper no one expects, life itself prepares a lesson no coin can purchase, no comfort can replicate, and no heart will forget. Two worlds were about to collide, and neither girl would remain unchanged. Morning unfolded slowly across Ibadan, as though the sun itself hesitated before lighting two very different lives. In the Eniton estate, Ayamide sat on her oversized bed, staring at the gleaming marble floor that reflected sunlight like liquid gold. Her room smelled of polished wood and expensive perfumes, yet she felt a hollowness she could not name. "Why am I restless?" she whispered aloud, the question hanging in the air like smoke. Outside, the city thrummed with life, but it carried no answers. Across the city, in a small weathered house patched with nylon and zinc, Efialua stirred with quiet determination. The thin mat beneath her body made no sound, yet she rose as if greeting the day with purpose. Mama Ireti handed her a small tin of pap and a dry slice of bread. "Eat quickly, child," she urged. "The market waits, and we cannot linger." Ifialua nodded, her eyes absorbing the sunlight that filtered through the tattered curtain. She whispered a prayer as she ate. "Thank you, God, for another day," though she could not see how the day would unfold. Meanwhile, Ayamide, dressed in her designer uniform, picked at her breakfast of fried plantains and eggs. Dissatisfied with the food, despite its warmth and aroma. "I don't understand why I feel so empty," she muttered. Mrs. Adebola approached, sighing softly, her hands folded over her chest. "Ayamide, your heart is restless because it has never known limitation. You have always been protected from difficulty." Ayamide's eyes narrowed. "Limitation? I have everything I could want. What do you mean?" Mrs. Adebola looked at her daughter with quiet intensity. "You have been given comfort, yes, but not understanding. There is a difference between having and knowing." Across town, Ifialua had finished her meal and prepared to leave for school. She gathered her uniform carefully, patched at the seams, and held her mother's hands briefly. "I will do my best today, Mama," she said softly. Mama Ireti nodded, eyes tired but proud. "Do not forget where you come from, my child. Remember gratitude, even when life seems cruel." The market was alive with shouting vendors, smells of roasted maize and fried fish mingling in the hot air, children running barefoot, their laughter cutting through the morning haze. Ifialua walked among them with quiet resolve, her eyes wide but steady. She noticed everything: the broken cart, the bargaining mothers, the child crying over spilt water. Each moment etched a lesson into her heart. Ayamide, on the other hand, walked to her school in a sleek car, air-conditioned and comfortable, the world outside the tinted windows foreign and distant. She barely noticed the children playing in the dust, the beggars at the roadside, the sweat-soaked merchants selling vegetables by weight. To her, The world beyond the gates was a backdrop for irritation, an inconvenience to be ignored. At school, both girls sat in separate classrooms, worlds apart yet destined to converge. Ifeoluwa answered questions with humility, helping classmates when needed, while Ayamide complained at the slightest disruption, her teacher's patience tested. The contrast was stark. One child thrived despite scarcity, the other struggled despite abundance. That afternoon, the Eniton estate seemed to pulse with unease. Ayamide's mother, Mrs. Adebola, walked the halls with careful deliberation. Her mind had settled on a daring plan, one that would test both her daughter and the girl she had observed from afar. Ayamide had asked for a mother who understood her, yet she had no idea the lesson that awaited. Across the city, Mama Ireti returned home, Ifeoluwa trailing behind with her small bag. The rain had begun to fall lightly, turning the mud into sticky paths that tugged at bare feet. "Careful, child," Mama Ireti warned, steadying her daughter. Ifeoluwa nodded, stepping cautiously, each movement precise. When they reached their small home, the tin roof rattled as rain fell harder. Inside, the walls bore the scars of years, yet Ifeoluwa moved with a quiet grace, arranging her few belongings with care, as if respect could turn scarcity into dignity. Meanwhile, Ayamide, restless and agitated, paced the polished floors of her mansion, checking her phone repeatedly, though no new message could soothe her. The emptiness she felt was unfamiliar and unnerving. She thought of the girl she had seen at the estate gate, quiet, respectful, bowing with grace despite her obvious lack. A strange jealousy twisted in Ayamide's chest, though she could not name it. That evening, Mrs. Adebola made her move. She approached Ayamide, calm but determined, her eyes holding a seriousness that startled her daughter. "Ayamide," she began, voice measured, "I have been thinking about what you said last night. About another mother, about understanding." Ayamide scoffed, arms crossed. "Yes? Are you finally going to get it?" Mrs. Adebola shook her head slowly. "No, I am going to teach you, but not with words alone. You will need to experience, to feel what it is to live beyond comfort." Ayamide's eyes widened. "Experience? What do you mean?" Mrs. Adebola leaned closer. "You will live with another family, a girl your age. A home very different from this. You will go to school as she does. You will eat, sleep, and live as she lives. Only then will your heart understand." Silence fell. Ayamide stared at her mother, disbelief and anger warring in her expression. "You can't be serious. You want me to live in poverty?" Mrs. Adebola nodded. "I am serious. And if you resist, your resistance will teach nothing. If you accept, your heart may finally open." That night, Ayamide lay in her luxurious bed, the sheets cool against her skin, yet no comfort could ease the storm inside her. She imagined the girl, the small, quiet one at the gates, wondering if she would survive the walls of wealth now closing in on her. Across town, Mama Ireti had a sleepless night too. She sensed something shifting, a plan forming she could not fully comprehend. Ifeoluwa slept lightly, ears alert to the rain, heart steady, unaware of how the coming days would test her courage. Morning came with a tension that gripped the city. Rain fell in gentle sheets, softening dust and filling puddles. Ayamide's eyes opened, a strange fear gnawing at her chest. She dressed quickly, her mind restless. When Mrs. Adebola entered to guide her, Ayamide stood abruptly, protesting. "I will not do this. I can't live like her." Her mother's gaze did not waver. "You can, and you will. Consider it a lesson in humility and understanding. Today, your life as you know it ends. Tomorrow, You will awaken in a world that will demand gratitude in ways you cannot imagine. Meanwhile, Mama Ireti stood at her gate, clutching her wrapper tightly, sensing the presence of someone extraordinary approaching. Ifeoluwa, small hands folded over her bag, looked up at the approaching car with a mixture of curiosity and fear. She had no idea what awaited her, yet her heart beat with quiet anticipation, trusting in the divine for guidance. The car stopped and Ayamide stepped out, her polished shoes sinking into the mud, eyes wide with horror. She looked at Mama Ireti, then at Ifeoluwa, and felt a flicker of vulnerability she had never known. The two worlds were about to collide, and neither girl would remain unchanged. Mama Ireti extended her hand gently. "Careful," she said softly. "The ground is soft. It will take time to adjust." Ayamide glared at the mud, the rain, the smell, the life that seemed to press in on her from all sides. She felt fear, anger, and confusion twisting together. For the first time, the universe demanded that she yield. Ifeoluwa looked at Ayamide, seeing not an enemy, but someone on the edge of learning, her small frame poised as if to offer welcome without words. The mothers watched silently, hearts taut with anticipation. A moment stretched, long and unbroken, as the first step toward understanding and transformation was taken. Ayamide's pride bristled, Ifeoluwa's humility radiated, and the rain fell steadily, washing the city and their destinies in equal measure. By the time the two girls moved together toward Mama Ireti's home, the contrast of wealth and want had never felt so sharp. Ayamide's polished heels sank into the mud. Her expensive clothes clung uncomfortably to her skin. Ifeoluwa walked with steady steps, guiding her guest with quiet patience. The lesson had begun, and somewhere in the soft patter of rain, in the scent of wet earth, in the tension of two hearts facing each other, the first seed of understanding was sown. It was fragile, invisible, yet powerful. A month of transformation lay ahead, and neither girl nor their mothers could know the depth of the change awaiting them. The city watched silently, the wind still carrying whispers of fate, knowing that gratitude, humility, and resilience were about to be tested in ways no child could anticipate. Two worlds had collided, two hearts would collide, and neither would ever be the same again. Sit close, children, the spirits are listening, for the night has opened its ear, and the soil beneath our feet wishes to remember this tale exactly as it is unfolding. The crickets have taken their seats, the wind quieted its tongue, and the moon, that watchful elder, leans low as though it wishes to witness what happens next in the entwined destinies of Ayamide and Ifeoluwa. For a single thought from a mother can sometimes travel farther than her feet, and last longer than her breath. And so it was that the seed of Mrs. Edebola's decision, planted in silence and watered with worry, finally broke through the soil of her mind. It happened quietly, without shouting or proclamation, for some choices do not need horns or drummers to announce them. If words cannot soften her heart, she whispered to herself, as though the rafters might betray the secret to dawn, then perhaps the world itself must teach her what my voice cannot. Yet even as she thought it, she prayed she was not making a mistake. Meanwhile, Ayamide lay in bed that night, turning and twisting not because the sheets were rough, but because the echo of her mother's steady disappointment had settled like a stone on her chest. She could not name the feeling, for she was unused to discomfort without a clear solution. She had always been taught that every problem had a button to press, a call to make, a person to summon. But this problem, this emptiness, seemed to have no edges she could push against. Somewhere across the city, under a roof patched with tin and prayers, Ifeoluwa slept lightly, curled like a small question mark beside Mama Ireti. Even in dreams, she sensed her mother's fatigue. Perhaps in sleep, she wandered into fields unburdened by hunger, but the dawn always tugged her back. The next morning, Ibadan woke with the usual chorus. Roosters giving commands, sellers clearing throats for sales, birds stitching melodies into the fabric of the day. But beneath the ordinary noise, fate hummed louder, preparing its tools. Mrs. Adebola rose early, long before the kitchen awoke, and stood by her daughter's closed door. She did not knock. She simply listened. Behind that door was a child who believed the world owed her its finest offerings. Beyond the estate walls was another child grateful for crumbs. How could the two ever understand one another unless they stepped into the other's shadows? When Ayamide finally emerged, yawning dramatically, she found her mother already waiting at the dining table, her face composed into something unreadable. "Good morning," her mother said, voice steady. "Your breakfast is served. Pancakes, fruit, steaming tea, the usual suspects." Ayamide sighed. "Again? Why do we never have anything different?" The maid stiffened. Words like that could slice deeper than poverty. Mrs. Adebola lifted her teacup but did not sip. "Eat what is before you," she murmured. "There will come a time when you will remember these breakfasts more kindly." Ayamide shrugged, unaware that her mother's words were not prophecy but preparation. Halfway across the city, Ifeoluwa tied her school shoes, pulling the laces tight so they would not betray her with a sudden unraveling. She kissed her mother's cheek lightly, an instinct of affection, not extravagance. Mama Ireti blessed her with the sign of the cross and words carried forward from generations. "May your hands find kindness and your heart give it back." The day unfolded as most days do, ordinary on the surface, while great change brews beneath. Ayamide endured her lessons, each minute stretching like unwound cloth. Her tutors tried stories, games, challenges, none sparking her attention. "Everything is boring," she muttered. "Nothing ever changes." If only she knew. Ifeoluwa, meanwhile, moved quietly through her classroom, absorbing information like dry soil welcomes rain. She understood that knowledge might one day become a bridge to carry her beyond the mud paths she walked. Teachers smiled when she raised her hand. Classmates leaned close when she shared her thoughts. She did not shine loudly, but her light was steady. At midday, the paths of the two girls crossed without meeting. From the school windows of her estate-based classroom, Ayamide spotted children in public school uniforms walking along the road. She wrinkled her nose, not in disgust but confusion. Their laughter was loud, carefree, unburdened, as though hunger were not snapping at their heels. "How can they laugh like that?" she asked. No answer came. Ifeoluwa walked that same road, clutching her books to her chest. She passed the estate walls with the same respectful bow she always gave, a gesture learned from elders, who said dignity must never depend on circumstance. After school, the lessons continued, not the kind on blackboards, but the kind woven by fate. Ayamide complained when her phone lagged. Ifeoluwa rejoiced when she found 50 naira forgotten in her pocket. Ayamide frowned when her nanny spoke softly. Ifeoluwa smiled when her mother scolded her gently. In those contrasting reactions lay the truth of their worlds. Evening returned, as evenings always do, to gather stories and tuck them beneath pillows. Sitting in her office, Mrs. Adebola reached into her drawer and pulled out the contact card of a social organization. She stared at the phone number, thumb hovering. She had heard whispers about a program, temporary cultural exchange, immersive empathy experiences, life lessons shaped through hardship instead of lectures. "Perhaps this is the answer," she murmured, though doubt nipped her thoughts. "Perhaps it is the only way." She dialed. "Yes," she said when the voice answered. "I am calling to enroll my daughter." Across town, Mama Ireti felt a flutter in her spirit, the kind that comes when a season is preparing to change, but has not yet declared its arrival. She did not know why, but she whispered, "God, hold her hand, wherever she goes." The wind outside shifted, playing with dust and palm fronds, carrying secrets yet unspoken. Two girls prepared for sleep, unaware that tomorrow would deliver a choice neither had asked for. A choice already made on their behalf, with love tangled tightly with desperation. The moon leaned even lower, as though hungry for the next chapter. For destiny, once set in motion, rarely pauses to ask permission. Part 5. Gather close, children, the night has something to say, and the spirits who perch on the branches of ancient Iroko trees are clearing their throats to speak. For tonight the tale of two daughters inches forward like a river in dry season. Quietly, purposefully, and with a promise that its course cannot be altered until its journey is complete. The wind has tightened its belt, and the moon has climbed into its seat of judgment. For when a mother decides to place her child in the hands of life itself, she must steel her heart for whatever comes next. Dawn crept into Ibadan as though unsure if it was welcome, brushing light across rooftops both copper-skinned and mud-brown. Ayamide still slept deeply, wrapped in comfort, unaware that her name had already been written into a plan with consequences more real than any of her complaints. Mrs. Adebola rose even before the sun finished its yawn. She dressed slowly, not out of vanity but deliberation. Every cloth she tied, every step she took whispered, "Let this be right." She moved through the quiet house, past the portraits of ancestors smiling flatly on the walls. "Guide me," she murmured toward their frozen faces. Yet ancestors rarely answer with words. They reply in outcomes. Across the city, Mama Ireti stirred awake, as though nudged by unseen fingers. Her dream had dissolved too quickly to grasp, but she had sensed movement, a shifting ground beneath her life. Her bones hummed with warning and promise. She knelt on the cold floor, hands clasped, and prayed not for wealth but for steadiness. "May the road meet her feet gently," she whispered about Ifeoluwa, "and may her steps not land where harm intends to dwell." Ifeoluwa dressed quietly, brushing her school shirt until it lay flat, humming a hymn whose melody floated lightly around her, a thread of peace. She did not know she was preparing not for an ordinary day, but for one that would bend her path like a branch persuaded by wind. At the estate, Ayamide groaned as morning insisted on waking her. She flung her blanket aside, not knowing it might be one of the last mornings she woke beneath such softness. In the dining room, Mrs. Adebola waited with the stiff stillness of someone who had made a decision and now feared her own resolve. Ayamide dropped onto the chair. "Pancakes again," she muttered. But this time her mother did not sigh, correct, or advise. Silence settled between them. Heavy, unfamiliar, the kind that forewarns change. "Eat," her mother said gently. "Today will be different." Ayamide raised an eyebrow. "How?" But no answer came. Not then. As Ayamide chewed reluctantly, Mrs. Adebola studied her daughter's face, memorizing its softness. Softness born not of love alone, but of insulation from struggle. When breakfast ended, the transformation began not with thunder or magic, but with a simple sentence spoken over cutlery. "You will spend some time away," her mother said. Ayamide blinked. "Away? Where? Why?" "You will learn something that cannot be taught here." The child laughed, thinking it a joke, but the tone, flat as an unearthed stone, proved otherwise. Meanwhile, Ifeoluwa walked with Mama Ireti toward the main road. They were greeted by familiar faces, the shared nods of people knitted together by survival. Today, however, Mama Ireti held her daughter's hand longer than usual. Words pressed at her lips, but would not form. Some instincts are too deep for speech. A car rolled into the lane. Sleek, unfamiliar, dust swirling beneath its tires. Neighbors lifted brows. Children pointed. Parents watched cautiously. The window lowered. A woman stepped out, dressed in careful linen, her expression respectful. "Good morning," she said. "Are you Mama Ireti?" The world tightened. Mama Ireti nodded slowly, her heart suddenly loud. "Yes, I am here for your daughter." Air thickened. The street leaned in to listen. "For what reason?" The woman bowed her head slightly. "An opportunity. A program for capable children from our community." She was recommended. Confusion warred with fear in Mama Ireti's eyes. "Recommended by who?" The woman smiled. "By someone who sees potential." It was not a lie, though the truth carried more weight. Ifeoluwa looked up at her mother, eyes wide but not frightened. She had never imagined a door might open for her without her knocking. "She will stay with us for 1 month," the woman continued, "and learn in a new environment." Mama Ireti hesitated. Her daughter's life depended on caution, but hope tugged at her sleeve. "Will she be safe?" she asked. "As safe as any child in our care," the woman replied softly. The promise rang true enough, and so the decision was sealed not with signatures, but trembling breath and faith. "Go, my child," Mama Ireti whispered, fighting the sting in her eyes. "Taste whatever life puts before you, and remember who you are." Ifeoluwa hugged her, imbibing warmth that would need to last beyond a day. The car door closed, a soft sound that echoed like a drumbeat. Across the city, Ayamide stood frozen by her own car, arms crossed, face twisted in disbelief as her mother repeated instructions. "You will not have your phone," she said. "You will not have your driver. You will stay with another family. You will listen, learn, and live differently. You can't make me." Ayamide snapped. But she was a tree uprooted before she realized she had been planted too comfortably. Tears clung to her lashes, not of sorrow but indignation. Yet her mother's decision did not bend. "You will go," she said, voice soft but ironed with certainty. 2 cars moved through the city like twin threads sewing a seam between 2 lives. One carried a child of scarcity into abundance. The other carried a child of comfort into simplicity. The city breathed. The ancestors leaned forward. And the spirits murmured. "Now the real story begins. Lean closer, children. The tale is not done. And the fire that warms us tonight crackles as though eager to shape its sparks into words. For the night carries stories like gourds filled to the brim, and those who listen carefully may drink wisdom from them. The wind is restless now, weaving through alleyways and gated walls alike, because 2 paths that once ran far apart are bending toward a meeting point no ancestor foresaw, but all now witness. The cars that bore Ayamide and Ifeoluwa did not race like rival horses. They moved steadily, as though aware they carried more than passengers. In each sat a heartbeat pounding against fate's palm. Ayamide crossed her arms tightly, her eyes burning with disbelief at everything being taken from her. She saw streets she had never walked, homes she had only glanced at through tinted windows, faces that lived outside her assumptions. "How can people live like this?" she muttered as the city thinned into humbler spaces. The driver did not answer. Sometimes silence protects truth until the heart is ready to swallow it. Meanwhile, Ifeoluwa sat small but alert, hands folded in her lap like a student invited into a secret library. She did not ask why she had been chosen. Gratitude had always filled the cracks where questions might have lived. Yet deep inside, a tremor moved. Curiosity, fear, wonder, braided tightly like a well-plaited rope. When the car bearing Ayamide finally stopped, she stared at the dusty lane leading to a door worn smooth by years of knocking. She climbed out, her shoes gathering dust as though the ground wanted to claim her. A woman welcomed her, the coordinator, with a smile gentle but firm. "Your journey begins," she said, not as a greeting but as prophecy. Ayamide stepped through the doorway. Inside, the furniture was modest. The air smelled of stew and kerosene, and laughter from another room drifted like music carried by memory. It was a home that knew scarcity yet held warmth like a clay pot that keeps embers alive long after fire sleeps. "This is where?" Aamide asked sharply. "You're home for the month," the woman replied. Aamide scoffed, unable to mask her disbelief. "Where's my room?" "You will share," the woman said. Those words hit her harder than she expected. Share? A room? A bed? Her world trembled slightly. Far from that scene, the car carrying Ifeoluwa glided into the Eniton estate. The gates swung wide, as though welcoming royalty, though the girl who arrived bowed her head with humility rather than pride. Stepping onto the polished tiles felt like stepping into another universe. One where floors gleamed, air conditioners hummed, and food belonged not to fate but to choice. Mrs. Adebola greeted her with warmth that felt unfamiliar even to herself. "Welcome, Ifeoluwa," she said softly. "This house is yours now." Ifeoluwa curtsied instinctively and murmured, "Thank you, Ma." Her voice trembled, not with fear, but overwhelmed gentleness. Aamide, on the other side of the city, was introduced to her temporary family. A mother whose eyes held stories of sacrifice, and two siblings wide-eyed with wonder. "This is Aamide," the coordinator announced. The family smiled, though they sensed the storm she carried inside her. "You are welcome," said the mother, offering a bowl of food. But Aamide frowned at the meal. Beans and gari, humble and steaming. "Is this all?" she asked bluntly. The woman's brow softened rather than furrowed. "It is what we have," she replied, "and we thank God for it." Aamide looked away, yet the words lodged like seeds in soil that did not know it was fertile. Meanwhile, Ifeoluwa was shown a room that gleamed with polished wood and soft blankets, walls painted in colors rich as festival cloth. She stared not with greed but awe. "Is it truly mine?" she whispered. "It is ours together," said Mrs. Adebola. "Your journey begins now." That first night in switched worlds was not peaceful for either child. Aamide tossed and turned on a mattress thinner than she wanted, awakened by sounds she never knew. Goats bleating, neighbors calling, pots clanging rhythmically like morning drums. "I want to go home," she muttered fiercely into the darkness. But the darkness did not reply. It simply wrapped her thin blanket closer, teaching her that comfort is not always the same as warmth. Ifeoluwa lay beneath thick covers, unable to sleep, because the softness felt too generous, blankets too heavy, silence too wide. She thought of her mother praying by oil lamp, remembered the smell of firewood smoke, heard in memory the hum of neighbors sharing gossip. Tears escaped quietly, not of sorrow, but love stretched thin across distance. Morning approached differently for each child. Aamide was woken not by gentle knocking, but by the cry of "Wake up. We must fetch water before the sun climbs." She blinked, stunned. Fetch water. She could not understand why water needed collecting. Water had always come when she demanded it. But the girl sharing the room, bright-eyed and already half-dressed, grabbed a bucket and said, "If you don't rise now, the queue will beat you." Aamide followed, her steps reluctant, lungs tasting morning dust she had never inhaled. The line at the tap stretched long, but children laughed, neighbors gossiped, and life moved with a rhythm older than comfort. When it was her turn, Aamide groaned at the weight. Tola giggled. "The bucket listens to no complaints," she teased. Across the city, Ifeoluwa was greeted not by demands but options: toast or akara, eggs or fruit, tea or juice. The luxury felt unreal, yet she reined in urge, whispering a proverb. The mouth that eats well must remember the mouth that waits. She ate slowly, savoring instead of devouring. As noon approached, both girls stood on opposite ends of experience. One learning want, the other learning abundance, though neither yet understood the reason. But the ancestors nodded, seeing balance forming like clay taking shape on a potter's wheel. For a lesson half-lived cannot be half-learned. And the moon watched, preparing to witness everything that would follow. Lean closer, children. The tale is not done. For the sun has only just begun to trace the new paths these girls must walk. And those who think they understand the world from only one side have never stood where another person stands. The morning swallowed the night's confusion, but traces of fear still clung to Iamide's heart as she staggered beneath the burden of the water bucket that cut into her palms like unforgiving truth. Sweat gathered on her forehead, dripping into her eyes as she struggled to steady each step. Around her, the queue moved like a living creature, chattering, teasing, laughing, and somehow turning hardship into song. Children who had less than her, or rather, less than she had once possessed, handled their buckets like feathers while hers felt like stone. She hissed under her breath, stumbling as the water sloshed dangerously. "Why must this be done every day?" she snapped. Tola did not miss a beat. "Because water does not walk to us," she answered, as though stating the simplest fact in the world. Then she added gently, "But you will get used to it." We all did. Aamide wanted to argue, to scream that she should not have to get used to anything. But her voice dissolved in the dusty air. Something inside her softened, just a little, but enough to let the morning breeze slip through the cracks of her resistance. On the other side of the city, Ifeilua was being introduced to wealth in motion. The Adebula household moved with precision and intention. Workers cleaned silently. Cooks crafted meals as though food were sculpture, and every corner of the house gleamed with evidence of investment. Yet what surprised Ifeilua most was the emptiness behind the polish, a silence that hummed between walls too smooth to remember laughter. Mrs. Adebula asked her what she would like to do that day, and Ifeilua lowered her gaze humbly. "Anything you need, Ma." "Not what I need," the woman insisted. "What you want." But wanting was foreign to Ifeilua. She was used to doing, not desiring. So she remained quiet, folding her hands together. Mrs. Adebula sighed softly and led her toward the kitchen. "Come sit," she offered. "Let us talk." Aamide returned from her first morning chore exhausted in body and pride alike, only to find that breakfast was not waiting on polished trays as it used to be. The meal had to be prepared, and everyone had a role. The mother stirred the pot with practiced hands, and Aamide watched as tomatoes, onions and pepper transformed into stew under the guidance of flame. She wrinkled her nose as the smell of frying oil filled the air, and she whispered, "Isn't there a cook?" Tola burst into laughter. "Mama is the cook." Aamide felt foolish. She had never seen cooking as labor, never associated meals with effort or sacrifice. Food had always appeared like magic. Now she watched the woman taste, adjust, stir, and turn simple ingredients into sustenance. Not abundance, but enough, and she felt a strange stirring of admiration. Ifeilua, meanwhile, sat with Mrs. Adebula and listened as the woman revealed pieces of her heart she had not shown even to her own daughter. "We have been blessed, yes," she said, tracing the rim of her teacup. "But blessings can be dangerous when they make you forget they are blessings." The words landed like seeds. "Aamide is a good girl," she continued, "but privilege can blind a child faster than dust blinds an eye on the road." Ifeilua nodded slowly. She wanted to defend Aamide but did not know her well enough to try. What she did know was struggle, responsibility, and gratitude. Knowledge etched into her bones by necessity. Back in the modest household, Aamide sat cross-legged on the floor with the younger siblings as they ate simple pap and stew from shared plates. It tasted foreign at first, too spicy, not rich enough, but hunger worked its own magic, and she found herself eating faster than she wished to admit. For the first time, she noticed the way the family murmured a quick prayer of thanks before each meal. It was not forced or showy, just sincere. When they finished, the children got up to carry their own plates to the washing area, and Aamide sat frozen as though someone had suggested she lift a mountain. "We wash what we use," Tola said, already halfway through scrubbing. "Is that not normal?" "In my house, someone does it for us," Aamide murmured. Tola smiled kindly rather than mock her. "Not here. Here hands that eat are hands that clean." Later, as the day unfolded, both girls continued their journey through unfamiliar routines. Ifeoluwa followed Mrs. Adebola to charity committee meetings, where women planned distributions of food to communities like the one she came from. Listening quietly, Ifeoluwa nearly gasped. The wealthy were aware, perhaps not always correctly, perhaps from a distance, of the poverty she lived daily. Yet Aamide's mother still grieved the disconnect between giver and receiver. "You cannot fix a wound you have never touched," she murmured, almost to herself. Ifeoluwa felt those words settle like heavy cloth around her small shoulders. In the poorer household, Aamide helped sweep the compound, dust rising with each stroke. At first her motions were clumsy, but soon her rhythm matched that of others. Neighbors greeted her politely though, curiously. Children waved. An elderly woman sitting under a mango tree looked at her with eyes sharp as hawk feathers and said, "Sometimes the sky sends rain to land that thinks it is already wet." Aamide did not fully understand, but the proverb followed her like a shadow. By evening, both girls sat exhausted, one in a house large enough to echo, one in a house small enough to breathe with its occupants. Yet neither knew that their lessons were only beginning. The ancestors watched closely, whispering, "Balance must be restored not to punish, but to teach." And the moon rose again, silver and patient, ready to record their dreams. "Do you hear? We hear? Do you see? We see." The ancestors hum their warnings beneath every breath the girls take, for the path ahead grows thornier as comfort and hardship twist more tightly around their souls. Aamide woke to the chorus of morning sounds she once ignored. The neighbor's rooster calling the sun awake, the shuffle of feet preparing for another day, and the gentle laughter of a community that possessed little yet held much. Sleep still wrapped itself around her eyes, but she rose because others rose. Nobody called her name, nobody waited to urge her, nobody offered warm towels or silver trays. The world moved whether she wished to move with it or not. As she stepped outside, she saw Tola already tending to chores with practiced ease and a smile that did not seem worn or forced. Aamide watched for a heartbeat longer, then whispered, "Teach me." The words tasted unfamiliar, but Tola nodded as though she had been waiting for them. Side by side they worked, sweeping dust into neat piles, rinsing bowls, folding clothes dried beneath the sun. Each action stole Aamide's breath, yet each taught her something hidden in plain sight. Strength grows where choice ends and necessity begins. Meanwhile, Ifeoluwa awoke in sheets soft as clouds. Yet restfulness escaped her, for her mind was not used to silence or softness that asked nothing in return. She padded through halls wide enough for echoes to feel lonely, and paused before a framed photograph. Aamide as a small child, smiling between parents who radiated pride. Ifeoluwa touched the glass lightly. "You are loved," she murmured, and the realization pulsed like a drumbeat. She was living in a space shaped by love, even if that love did not always show its face kindly. Downstairs, breakfast steamed on the table, laid out carefully by people with practiced hands. Mrs. Adebola invited Ifeoluwa to sit beside her. The two ate together quietly. Then came the question that dropped like a pebble into water whose surface looked still. What do you think my daughter needs to learn? The girl nearly choked. Me? Me. Choked. Me? I am not. You are exactly who can answer, the woman insisted. You have lived where she has not. Ifeoluwa searched her heart carefully. Maybe she needs to see how people share when they have little, she said softly. In my home, we divide food even when we are hungry, because we know hunger is lighter when carried together. Mrs. Adebola nodded slowly, absorbing the truth like parched earth taking rain. Back in the other home, Ayamide was beginning to see the same truth from another angle. As Tola's mother prepared a small midday meal, neighbors appeared at the door, asking for salt, asking for soap, asking for news. Nobody was turned away. Each request was met not only with what was asked, but with warmth, with laughter, with stories traded like currency older than coins. Ayamide blinked, puzzled. But you do not have enough, she whispered. The mother smiled. Where there is heart, there is enough, she replied. We may lack things, but we are never empty. The words struck like thunder softened by distance, loud but gentle, impossible to ignore. That evening, Ifeoluwa was invited to join a community outreach led by Mrs. Adebola. They drove to the edge of the city where tar roads crumbled into sandy earth, and houses lowered themselves into simpler shapes. Bags of rice and tins of oil were distributed, polite greetings exchanged. Children waved shyly before bursting into giggles. Ifeoluwa stood watching mothers thank the woman she stayed with. She began to understand the invisible thread binding wealth to responsibility. A cord easily forgotten when one never sees its other end. She overheard someone whisper, "Look, rich people think they know us." But someone else murmured, "At least they came." Ifeoluwa carried both voices home like twin weights that reshaped her spine. At nearly the same hour, Ayamide walked past a group of women cracking groundnuts and telling stories that blended humor and sorrow without apology. One elder paused mid-tale and stared at her long enough to raise goosebumps. "Child," the woman said, "a seed will not know its worth until it meets the earth." Ayamide bowed her head, unsure why the words pierced her so deeply. Later, when the younger children danced to clapping rhythms, she found herself smiling. Not because the world was easy, but because she understood, perhaps for the first time, why their joy felt deeper than hers ever had. When the moon climbed above roofs of corrugated metal, both girls lay in beds far apart but linked by lessons threading through their dreams. Ayamide whispered into the dark, "I was blind." Ifeoluwa whispered in another house, "I was unseen." And in the breath between their words, the ancestors murmured, "Both must learn, both must give, both must change." Do you hear? We hear. Do you see? We see. The story deepens. We, the watchers unseen, speak through wind and memory. We, the watchers unseen, speak through wind and memory, guiding children who believe themselves alone, though our whispers curl beside their spirits. Gentle as palm wine at dusk, stern as a talking drum before battle. Days passed like beads sliding across a string, each carrying its own lesson for Ayamide and Ifeoluwa. The exchange that began as shock and punishment was slowly shaping itself into awakening. In the humble household where Ayamide now lived, she began to hear every sound differently, as though each noise carried meaning she once overlooked. The creak of wood was not just tired furniture, but a home stretching its bones after generations of use. The laughter of siblings was not ordinary noise, but wealth so rich no counting hand could measure it. As she fetched water again, no longer stumbling or grimacing, she caught herself humming a tune she had never known she knew. Her muscles still ached, But the ache no longer felt like insult. It felt like proof of existence, of participation, of contribution. When she returned, she found Tola's father mending a stool with patient hands. The man beckoned her to sit and watch. "Things break," he told her without looking up. "But breaking is not the end of the story. It may even be the beginning of a better one." Aamide swallowed the words as though swallowing medicine she needed. Soon, the stool stood strong again, steadier than before. She realized she understood the message without needing explanation. Across the city, Ifeoluwa was learning different lessons in a home where nothing ever appeared broken, because invisible hands fix problems long before they reach the surface. Yet beneath the shine, she began to note cracks no polish could hide. She noticed how Mrs. Adebola's voice softened when she spoke of her daughter, but hardened when she spoke to her. She noticed how the father arrived late most nights and sat at dinner with eyes full yet distant. She noticed that wealth did not banish sorrow. It merely gave sorrow better clothing. One evening, the family invited friends for dinner, and Ifeoluwa was asked to join at the table rather than eat in the kitchen. Her heart thudded with uncertainty, but she obeyed. The conversation danced from business to travel to new technology, all topics she had no foothold in. Yet when someone made a passing joke about people from certain communities, her spine stiffened. She recognized the veiled disdain, the dismissal dressed as wit. She lowered her head so no one saw her eyes burn with shame or fury. After the guests left, Mrs. Adebola found her sitting alone near the large window, staring out at the city lights. "You heard what he said," the woman said softly. Ifeoluwa nodded, unable to speak. "Remember this," Mrs. Adebola whispered. "Comfort makes some people forget humanity. Do not become one of them." The girl felt seen in a way she had not expected. Back in the other household, Aamide continued discovering pieces of herself buried beneath entitlement. When the midday sun rested high and sharp, the family took a brief pause to eat fruit and breathe. The younger siblings argued over who got the largest piece of mango, and the mother laughed as she cut equal slices. "Fairness is what we hold on to when we have little," she said. "It keeps peace inside the home even when trouble waits outside." Aamide chewed slowly, tasting sweetness more deeply than she had ever tasted in fruits delivered to her in crystal bowls. Later that afternoon, neighbors gathered to discuss a shared repair needed on the road. Everyone contributed something: money, labor, ideas, encouragement. Aamide marveled. She had never seen a community fix what belonged to all, instead of waiting for someone powerful to fix it for them. "If the road is ours," one man said, "why should we wait for strangers to decide when it becomes safe?" The statement carved itself into her mind like marks on calabash. Meanwhile, Ifeoluwa accompanied Mrs. Adebola to a school where scholarships funded by the family were awarded. Children beamed with pride as they received books and backpacks. Their parents bowed in gratitude so deep it startled Ifeoluwa. She remembered times when her own mother stood in lines like those, quietly hoping for opportunities that rarely came. Watching now from this new vantage, she felt tears sting her eyes. When they left, Mrs. Adebola said, "We give, yes, but we also receive. Those children remind us why blessings must flow outward. A river that refuses to share its water becomes a swamp." The girl tucked that proverb beside all the others she had collected like secret gems. Night folded over both homes, and though lanterns and city lights differed, the thoughts running through both girls' minds shone with similar brightness. Aamide sat with Tola, trading stories for the first time without arrogance. She spoke of her old life with humility instead of boasting. She admitted fears she never dared name. Tola listened without envy, only curiosity and warmth. Ifeoluwa, in her borrowed room, wrote notes in a small journal provided by the Adebolasa Reflections, observations, promises to herself. She vowed that if she returned home, she would bring new pathways with her, The ancestors whispered through rooftops and tree branches. Now they see different sides of the same sky. Soon, the storm of truth will come, for balance had only begun to settle, and the revelation waiting at the end would test every lesson learned. We, the watchers unseen, remain patient. The story nears its turning. When two rivers meet, neither remains the same. So say the elders. And so did the ancestors mark this exchange long before the girls were born, trusting that hearts shaped by hardship and privilege might find balance where pride once stood. The final day of the month arrived quietly, slipping into dawn with no drums, no thunder, just a hush that felt like breath held too long. Aamide awoke before anyone called her name, rising as though the morning tugged her from sleep by a thread tied to new understanding. She moved with purpose, sweeping, fetching water with steady arms, greeting neighbors with warmth instead of discomfort. In her chest, something once swollen with entitlement now pulsed smaller, steadier, truer. But beneath her new calm hid a trembling fear. What would become of this family that had opened their home to her, accepted her without once reminding her she was different? Could she leave a place that had given her what gold never had? Humility, connection, and gratitude. Across the city, Ifeoluwa tied her hair carefully, staring at her reflection with disbelief. She no longer looked like the girl who arrived clutching poverty like a shield. Her eyes held question and certainty at once. Question of where she belonged. Certainty that she would never again hide her dreams. Mrs. Adebola touched her shoulder gently. "Today," she whispered, "the circle closes." "I don't want the circle to close," Ifeoluwa confessed. "If it stays open forever, it is no longer a circle," the woman said with a sad smile. "Some things must end to become part of us." And so the hour came. The two mothers stood at the old tree where the paths of destiny had crossed. Aamide and Ifeoluwa faced each other, changed but whole, shaken but strong. Neither spoke at first. Words suddenly felt too small to hold everything they had carried, and everything they would return with. Then Aamide bowed her head, not out of shame but acknowledgement. "I judged what I did not understand," she said quietly. "I believed comfort was my right, not a gift." Ifeoluwa stepped forward. "And I thought those with wealth could never know struggle," she admitted. "But I learned sorrow wears many skins." The mothers embraced their daughters, tears softening the space between them. The swap unspooled as gently as it had begun. But the world they returned to was not the same. Back in her grand home, Aamide walked through rooms she once floated through without noticing. She touched objects lightly, as though seeing them for the first time. The carved stools, the shelves of books she had never read. The kitchen where her family's cook now smiled at her in surprise when she offered to chop vegetables. "You don't have to," the woman said. "I know," Aamide answered. "But I want to." She sat with her parents later that evening and told them, not with complaint but with reverence, about the family she lived with, how they worked together, how they shared joy and burden, how they held each other close when the world pushed hard. Her father listened, eyes widening with a quiet understanding he had long forgotten. "We give," he murmured, "but maybe we must also walk near those we give to." Her mother nodded, tears gathering like rain on new soil. Meanwhile, Ifeoluwa stepped into her old home, feeling everything both familiar and transformed. The place looked smaller only because she had grown. Her siblings ran to her, clinging with relief and wonder, and she laughed. Deep, warm laughter that felt like sunlight poured into her bones. She hugged her mother tightly and whispered, "We will dream bigger now." The woman stared at her, seeing not a child returned, but a future widened. And then words spread quietly. The rich girl who had learned to carry water, the poor girl who shared tables with wealthy families, the mothers who dared to open doors, the month that turned strangers into mirrors. Life carried on, as life always does, but not blindly. Aamide began volunteering with her mother, visiting communities she once viewed from afar. She greeted people not with pity but kinship, and sometimes she carried heavy buckets alongside the children, and they trusted her enough to laugh when water splashed her feet. Ifeyelua, armed with knowledge and courage, started school with new resolve. She studied fiercely, knowing opportunity demanded tribute and effort. She wrote stories at night, stories about two girls, to mothers, two worlds learning the taste of each other's lives. And the families did not drift apart. The Adebalos returned often, not as benefactors looking down, but as friends sitting on low stools under mango trees, sharing meals and listening to stories from lips browned by sun and wisdom. When seasons shifted and memory softened edges, the truth remained. Wealth without humility becomes emptiness. Hardship without vision becomes bitterness. But when experience flows both ways, gratitude takes root. And so the elders lean forward and conclude. A child who walks two roads grows feet-wise enough to guide others. Two girls, once strangers by circumstance, now bound by understanding, carried their lessons forward. And their mothers, who dared to answer the reckless wish that began it all, carried pride deeper than gold could buy. When two rivers meet, neither remains the same, and those shaped by that meeting become rivers themselves, carving new paths into the land. The story ends where change begins.